Alien girl misbehaved, so the human delivered some firm discipline. Commander Christopher Reed stood at rigid attention in the gleaming control center of Nexus Station, a massive interstellar hub where dozens of alien species conducted trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. His muscular frame, honed by years of military service and security work, filled out his tight black sleeveless shirt impressively. The dark cargo pants and combat boots completed his intimidating appearance. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Christopher addressed Station Director Phelps, a stern-faced human with salt and pepper hair who represented Earth's interests on this alien outpost. Phelps nodded grimly. "Reed, I've got a special assignment for you, one that's challenging." "I specialize in challenging, sir?" "Not like this." Phelps tapped his console, bringing up a personnel file. "This is Lady Illyria Thalvarin, daughter of High Counselor Thalvarin of the Verdant Conclave." The holographic display showed a striking humanoid female with vibrant emerald skin and flowing silver hair that cascaded down her shoulders. Her eyes held a mischievous glint that set off warning bells in Christopher's head immediately. "She's been sent here as part of a diplomatic exchange program, but she's proven to be problematic," Phelps continued. "3 security personnel have already requested reassignment. She's willful, disrespectful, and apparently believes station regulations don't apply to her." Christopher studied the image. "And you want me to babysit her? I want you to keep her safe and ensure she doesn't cause an interstellar incident. The Conclave is a crucial trading partner. We can't afford to offend them, but we also can't have her disrupting station operations. With all due respect, sir, I'm trained for combat situations, not handling spoiled aristocrats." Phelps's expression hardened. "This is a direct order, Commander. You've got a reputation for handling difficult situations with a cool head. Besides, your background in xenopsychology might give you an edge the others lacked." Christopher sighed. "When do I start?" "Immediately. She's waiting in Diplomatic Suite 17. And Reed?" Phelps' voice took on a warning tone. "Try not to strangle her, no matter how tempting it might become." The door to Suite 17 slid open, revealing a luxurious apartment with panoramic views of the swirling nebula outside the station. Christopher stepped inside, scanning for his new charge. "So they have sent another one," came a melodic voice from behind him. Christopher turned to find Lady Illyria lounging on a plush sofa. She was even more striking in person, her green skin almost luminescent under the suite's ambient lighting. She wore what could only be described as provocative, a short black leather bodysuit with a plunging neckline that left little to the imagination, paired with thigh-high boots and long gloves of the same material. "Commander Christopher Reed, Station Security," he introduced himself, maintaining a professional demeanor despite her obvious attempt to provoke a reaction. Illyria rose with feline grace, circling him slowly. "My, they've upgraded the model. The last one was so fragile." She ran a gloved finger across his broad shoulders. "I wonder how long you'll last, huh?" Christopher remained perfectly still. "I've been briefed on your previous guard's experiences, Lady Thalvarin. I should inform you that I have different expectations for our professional relationship." She laughed, the sound like tinkling crystal. "Oh, I'm sure you do. They all start that way." She moved to a bar in the corner, pouring herself a vibrant blue liquid. "Drink?" "No, thank you. I'm on duty." "Always on duty, how terribly dull." She sipped her drink, eyeing him over the rim. "What shall we do for fun today, Commander? Perhaps I could slip away again and see how long it takes you to find me." "That won't be happening," Christopher stated flatly. "Won't it?" Her silver eyebrows arched in challenge. "You seem quite confident for someone who doesn't know what he's up against." "I'm confident because I understand boundaries, Lady Thalvarin. Something you might benefit from learning." Her playful expression hardened slightly. "Careful, human. Others have lost their positions for less insolence. I'm not here to be your friend or your servant. I'm here to ensure your safety and the station's security. If that means being direct with you, so be it." Illyria's eyes narrowed, but a smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Well, this might be more interesting than I thought." She downed her drink and set the glass down with a decisive clink. "Very well, Commander Reed. Let's see what you're made of." Before Christopher could respond, she darted toward the door, moving with surprising speed. But his reflexes were faster. He stepped smoothly into her path, blocking her exit. "Going somewhere?" he asked calmly. For a moment, genuine surprise flickered across her features before she masked it with a pout. "Just testing your reflexes. Not bad for a human." "Lady Talvarin." "Illyria," she interrupted. "If you're going to be my shadow, you might as well use my name." "Illyria," he conceded. "Let me be clear. I understand you're used to getting your way, but that ends now. While you're under my protection, you'll follow station protocols and behave with the dignity befitting your position." She stepped closer, tilting her head up to meet his gaze. "And if I don't?" Christopher met her challenging stare with cool resolve. "Then we'll have a problem, and I'm very good at solving problems." A tense silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken challenge. Finally, Illyria's lips curved into a genuine smile. "This might be fun after all, Commander Reed." Christopher had the distinct feeling he'd just stepped into a game where he didn't know all the rules. But one thing was certain, he wasn't about to let this green-skinned troublemaker get the better of him. The grand atrium of Nexus Station buzzed with activity as representatives from a dozen different species mingled at the monthly diplomatic reception. Christopher stood at attention near a pillar, his eyes never leaving Illyria as she flitted from one conversation to another. For 3 days, he'd managed to keep her out of trouble. Barely. She tested him at every turn, from accidentally entering restricted areas to attempting to slip away during routine station activities. Each time, he'd thwarted her with calm efficiency, earning himself increasingly creative challenges. "Your human is quite persistent," remarked Counselor Dren, a blue-skinned Aquarian diplomat, as Illyria approached with 2 glasses of shimmering liquid. "Isn't he just?" she replied with a smirk, handing one glass to the counselor. "Like a well-trained hound. Watch this." She raised her own glass in Christopher's direction before deliberately pouring its contents onto the pristine floor of the atrium. Several nearby diplomats gasped. Wasting the rare Centaurian spirit was considered highly offensive in multiple cultures. Christopher moved swiftly to her side, his expression neutral despite the provocation. "Lady Talvarin," he said quietly, "perhaps you've had enough refreshments for one evening." Illyria's eyes danced with mischief. "Oh, Commander, it was merely an accident. My hand slipped." She turned to the gathering crowd. "Humans can be so uptight about the smallest things, can't they?" Christopher leaned closer, his voice for her ears only. "We both know that wasn't an accident. If you're trying to embarrass me, you'll need to try harder." "Is that a challenge, Commander?" she whispered back, her breath warm against his ear. "It's a fact. Now shall we move along before you cause an actual diplomatic incident?" To his surprise, she acquiesced, allowing him to guide her away from the spill as station maintenance droids rushed to clean it up. As they walked, she slipped her arm through his, her touch lingering on his bicep. "You're different from the others," she observed. "They would have been flustered, angry even." "Getting angry would only give you what you want," Christopher replied evenly. "And what is it you think I want, Commander?" "Attention, reaction, proof that you can control the situation and me." Her step faltered slightly, the first genuine reaction he'd seen from her. "You presume much about a being whose species you barely understand?" "I understand more than you think. Your people value hierarchy and dominance displays. As a highborn, you're accustomed to deference. My refusal to be baited frustrates you because it denies you the power dynamic you're comfortable with." Illyria withdrew her arm, her playful demeanor momentarily replaced by something more guarded. "Careful, human. Your xenopsychology training only takes you so far. Far enough to know you're not just acting out for fun, you're testing boundaries because you've never had any." Her eyes flashed dangerously. "You think you know me after 3 days?" "I think I recognize someone who's never heard the word no before." For a moment, genuine anger crossed her features. Then, without warning, she grabbed a passing server's tray and hurled it across the room. The crash silenced the entire atrium as glassware shattered and food splattered across the floor. "There," she hissed. "Now tell me no." Christopher didn't hesitate. He took her firmly by the arm and led her toward the exit, his grip unyielding but not painful. "We're leaving." Remove your hand or lose it, she threatened, though she didn't physically resist. Make a scene and the diplomatic consequences fall on your father, he countered quietly. Is that what you want? The mention of her father seemed to hit home. She allowed herself to be escorted from the atrium, though her body radiated tension. Once they were in the corridor, Christopher released her arm but blocked her path when she tried to storm away. Move, she demanded. No, I said move. And I said no, that's a word you need to get familiar with, Illyria. Her hand lashed out to slap him, but he caught her wrist mid-swing. They stood frozen for a moment, her chest heaving with anger, his expression calm but resolute. You're acting like a spoiled child, Christopher said evenly, and it looks like it's time to teach you some discipline. Illyria's lips curled into a mocking smirk. And how exactly do you plan to? In one fluid motion, Christopher sat on a nearby bench and pulled her across his lap. Before she could process what was happening, his hand delivered 3 firm but measured smacks to her rear. He immediately set her back on her feet, his expression unchanged as he met her shocked gaze. Illyria's face flushed a deeper emerald, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Finally, she managed, "No one has ever dared to treat me like this." "Then it's long overdue," Christopher replied calmly, standing up. "Now we can return to your quarters civilly, or we can continue this lesson. Your choice, son." She stared at him, outrage warring with something else in her expression. Surprise, certainly, but also a grudging respect. Finally, she straightened her posture, chin lifted proudly. "Very well, Commander. Lead the way." As they walked in the silence toward the diplomatic wing, Christopher noticed her casting sidelong glances at him, her earlier hostility replaced by thoughtful curiosity. He'd taken a risk with his actions, one that could have backfired spectacularly. But his instincts had been right. Underneath her rebellious exterior was someone desperate for clear boundaries. When they reached her suite, she paused at the threshold. "This doesn't mean you've won, you know. This isn't about winning or losing, Illyria. It's about respect for others and for yourself." She considered this, then offered him the faintest smile. "Until tomorrow, Commander." As the door closed behind her, Christopher exhaled slowly. He had a feeling their relationship had just shifted into uncharted territory, and he wasn't entirely sure what to expect next. "You did what?" Station Director Phelps leaned forward across his desk, his expression a mixture of disbelief and horror. Christopher stood at attention, hands clasped behind his back. "I administered appropriate disciplinary action when Lady Thalvaren's behavior became destructive, sir. You put an alien dignitary over your knee like a child." Phelps ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Do you have any idea what kind of diplomatic incident this could cause?" "With respect, sir, I made a calculated decision based on my understanding of Verdant psychology. Their culture respects decisive action in clear hierarchy." Phelps sighed heavily. "And has she filed a formal complaint yet?" Before Christopher could respond, the office door slid open, revealing Illyria in a more modest outfit than usual, a sleek green jumpsuit that complemented her skin tone. "Director Phelps," she said with a formal nod, "I came to inform you that I've contacted my father to express my satisfaction with Commander Reed's service." Phelps looked stunned. "Well, I'm pleased to hear that. If you're satisfied, then Commander Reed will continue as your security detail." "Excellent," she turned to Christopher. "I believe we have a tour of the hydroponics base scheduled this morning." As they left Phelps' office, Christopher studied Illyria's profile. "That was unexpected." "What? That I didn't have you fired?" A hint of her usual smirk returned. "Perhaps I'm simply biding my time for revenge. Or perhaps you recognize the value of someone finally treating you as an equal rather than a pampered princess." She laughed softly. "Equal? You put me over your knee like a child. I treated you according to your behavior, not your status. There's a difference." The transport tube hummed as it carried them toward the agricultural section. Illyria watched the levels flash by, her expression pensive. "My father has never allowed anyone to discipline me," she said finally. "Not even my tutors. He believed it would diminish my spirit. And instead I learned that actions have no consequences, at least not for me." She turned to face him. "It's a terrible lesson, Commander. Before Christopher could respond, the transport tube jerked violently, throwing them against the wall. The lights flickered and died, replaced by dim emergency lighting. "What's happening?" Illyria asked, her voice tight. Christopher tapped his comm unit. "Read to security. We have a situation in transport tube 7 inches. Only static," answered him. "Communications are down. The station's emergency alert system activated. Attention all personnel. Security breach in progress. Lockdown protocols initiated." "Security breach?" Illyria's eyes widened. "It means someone's attacking the station." Christopher drew his sidearm, checking the charge. "And we're stuck in a transport tube with no communications." The emergency panel chirped with an incoming message. "Anyone in Tube 7, respond. This is Commander Reed with Lady Thalvarin. What's the situation?" "Commander, we've got hostiles on board. Krell mercenaries. They've taken control of the main hub and are working their way through the station. Their communications suggest they're looking for high-value hostages." Christopher glanced at Illyria, whose green complexion had paled. As the daughter of a high counselor, she would be a prime target. "Can you get us out of this tube?" "Negative. Systems are locked down, but there's a maintenance hatch in the ceiling. It leads to service corridors that run parallel to the tube network." Christopher holstered his weapon and moved to the center of the tube, examining the ceiling. "I need to reach that hatch. Can you give me a boost?" Illyria nodded, interlacing her fingers to create a foothold. Christopher stepped into her hands, impressed by her strength as she helped lift him toward the ceiling. Once inside the service corridor, he reached down and pulled her up beside him. "Stay close and stay quiet," Christopher instructed, drawing his weapon again. "We need to reach a secure area where I can contact security." They moved through the narrow passage in silence, the distant sounds of weapons fire and shouting occasionally reaching them. Illyria stayed right behind Christopher, her earlier bravado completely gone. After several minutes, they reached a junction where the corridor split in 3 directions. "Which way?" Illyria whispered. Before Christopher could answer, the sound of heavy footsteps came from the left passage. He quickly pulled Illyria into the right corridor, pressing her against the wall as he aimed his weapon. 3 Krell mercenaries appeared, their scaled skin and ridge-lined heads identifying them as a reptilian species known for their mercenary work. "The boss wants the green girl found," one growled. "A High Counselor's daughter will fetch a good ransom." "Sensors show 2 life forms nearby," another replied, checking a handheld device. "1 human, 1 Verdant." Christopher tensed. "When I move, run straight ahead," he whispered to Illyria. "Don't stop. Don't look back." "What are you going to do?" "Buy you time." Before she could protest, Christopher stepped into the junction, firing 3 rapid shots. The first mercenary went down, but the others returned fire. Illyria sprinted past him down the corridor. Christopher backed away, maintaining position between the mercenaries and Illyria's escape route. A plasma bolt sizzled past his ear as he returned fire, hitting 1 mercenary in the shoulder. The remaining Krell charged forward. They collided in a flurry of strikes. The mercenary's clawed hand raked across Christopher's chest, drawing blood. Christopher countered with a precise strike to the Krell's throat. With a surge of strength, Christopher got his legs under the Krell and pushed. As the mercenary fell back, Christopher delivered a devastating combination of strikes to vulnerable points. He sprinted after Illyria, finding her at another junction, pressed against the wall. "You're hurt," she gasped, eyes fixed on the blood seeping through his torn shirt. "It's nothing. We need to keep moving." He checked his comm unit. Still no signal. "This way. There should be an access point to the security level ahead." They continued through the maze of service corridors until they reached the security station. 2 officers looked up in surprise as they entered. "Commander Reed," one exclaimed, "we thought you were trapped in the transport system." "We found an alternative route," Christopher replied. "What's the situation?" "Krell mercenaries, about 20 of them. They've taken hostages in the main concourse, but we've contained them there. Director Phelps is coordinating with a response team." Christopher nodded. "Lady Thalvarin needs protection. Get her to the secure diplomatic quarters." "No," Illyria said firmly, surprising everyone. "I'm staying with you." "This isn't a game, Illyria. These mercenaries are specifically targeting you." "All the more reason I should help." Her eyes flashed with determination. My father taught me more than just how to be insufferable. I know Krell psychology better than anyone on this station. The security console lit up with an incoming transmission from Director Phelps. The mercenaries are demanding her in exchange for the hostages, Phelps explained grimly. They've given us 1 hour. That's not happening, Christopher stated flatly. Of course not, Phelps agreed. But we need a plan. They've got 30 civilians in there, including children from the station school. Illyria leaned forward. Director, the Krell are hierarchical. If we can identify and neutralize their leader, the others will be disoriented. Can you identify the leader? Christopher asked her. She nodded. If I can see them, yes. Krell leadership markings are subtle but unmistakable. One officer brought up surveillance footage. Illyria studied the images intently. There, she pointed to a mercenary standing apart from the others. See the scarlet markings on his neck ridges? That's their commander. Christopher examined the tactical layout. If we can get a small team in through the service corridors, we might be able to take out the leader without endangering the hostages. Illyria touched his arm. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. I can help, she insisted. The leader will be protected by his seconds. I can identify them too. And, she hesitated, I have certain abilities that might be useful. What abilities? My people can produce pheromones that affect certain species, including Krell. It can disorient them temporarily, enough to give you an advantage. Christopher considered this new information. Having Illyria along would be dangerous, but her knowledge and abilities could prove crucial. All right, he finally agreed. But you follow my orders exactly. No heroics, no improvisations. For once, she didn't smirk or make a sarcastic comment. She simply nodded, her expression serious. I understand, Commander. The service corridor leading to the main concourse was barely wide enough for Christopher's broad shoulders. He led a team of 4 security officers with Illyria directly behind him. Despite the gravity of the situation, he couldn't help noticing how different she seemed. Focused, determined, without a trace of her usual flippant attitude. The access point is just ahead, whispered Lieutenant Keller, checking her tactical display. It'll put us behind the food court, about 20 meters from the hostage group. Christopher nodded. Remember, our priority is the civilians. We identify the leader and his seconds, neutralize them, and create enough confusion for the hostages to reach the emergency exits. He turned to Illyria. Stay behind cover until I signal you. When I do, use your ability on as many Krell as you can reach, then get back to safety. Clear? Crystal, she replied, her vibrant green features set with determination. The team positioned themselves at the access hatch. Christopher checked his weapon one last time, then gave the signal. Keller overrode the hatch controls and it slid open silently. They emerged behind a row of shuttered food stalls, giving them a partial view of the concourse. The hostages were gathered in the central area, surrounded by Krell mercenaries. Christopher counted 15 visible hostiles, including the leader Illyria had identified. There, Illyria whispered, pointing discreetly. The 2 flanking him with the blue-tinted scales. Those are his seconds. They'll be the first to react if he's taken down. Christopher relayed this information to the team through hand signals. They spread out, taking cover behind various structures around the perimeter of the concourse. In position, came Keller's voice through his earpiece, followed by confirmations from the other officers. Christopher took a deep breath. Execute on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. In perfect synchronization, the security team fired stun rounds at the leader and his seconds. 2 hit their targets. The leader and 1 second dropped immediately. But the third Krell dodged at the last moment, bellowing in alarm. Chaos erupted. The remaining mercenaries took defensive positions, some using hostages as shields. Christopher cursed under his breath. This was exactly what they had hoped to avoid. Change of plans, he said into his comm. Keller, Rivera, cover the east exit. Chen, Prakash, the west. I'll create a diversion. Before anyone could question him, Christopher broke from cover, firing rapidly to draw the mercenaries' attention away from the hostages. It worked. Several Krell turned toward him, returning fire that forced him to dive behind a decorative planter. Now, Illyria, he called. To his shock, she was already moving. not toward safety, as he'd instructed, but directly toward the hostages. She dodged plasma fire with surprising agility, closing the distance to the nearest group of Krell. As she reached them, something remarkable happened. A subtle shimmer seemed to emanate from her skin, and the nearest mercenaries visibly faltered, their movements becoming uncoordinated. Some dropped their weapons, clutching at their throats as if struggling to breathe. "Run!" Illyria shouted to the hostages, pointing toward the exits where security officers waited. The civilians needed no further encouragement. They scrambled to their feet and fled towards safety as the affected Krell stumbled about in confusion. But not all the mercenaries were within range of Illyria's pheromones. One raised his weapon, aiming directly at her exposed back. Christopher reacted without thinking. He sprinted from cover, tackling Illyria to the ground as plasma fire scorched the air where she'd been standing. They rolled behind a toppled table, plasma bolts splintering the material around them. "I told you to stay back," Christopher growled, shielding her body with his own as debris rained down on them. "And let those children die," she shot back, her silver hair falling across her face. "I saw an opportunity and took it." Before he could respond, the distinctive sound of station security's heavy weapons filled the concourse. The remaining mercenaries, disorganized without their leader and affected by Illyria's pheromones, were quickly overwhelmed. "Clear!" came Keller's voice over the comm. "All hostages secured. Hostiles neutralized." Christopher exhaled in relief, suddenly aware of how tightly he was holding Illyria against him. Her emerald skin was flushed a deeper green, her breath coming in quick gasps that matched his own. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. She shook her head, silver eyes locked with his. "You saved my life." "You saved a lot more," he admitted grudgingly, "but don't ever disobey a direct order again." A hint of her usual smirk returned. "I make no promises, Commander." The moment was interrupted as security teams flooded the concourse, securing the subdued mercenaries. Christopher helped Illyria to her feet, noticing she seemed unsteady. "The pheromones," she explained, seeing his concern. "Using them so intensely is draining." He supported her with an arm around her waist as they made their way to where Director Phelps was coordinating the aftermath. "Outstanding work, Commander," Phelps said, genuine respect in his voice. "And Lady Thal Varen, your assistance was invaluable. I'll be sure your father hears of your courage today." Illyria leaned more heavily against Christopher. "Thank you, Director, but I believe I need to rest now." "Of course. Commander, see her safely to her quarters." As they walked slowly toward the diplomatic wing, Christopher found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about Illyria. The spoiled, capricious aristocrat had shown courage, quick thinking, and selflessness when it mattered most. "You're staring," she murmured, glancing up at him, just trying to reconcile the woman who threw a tray across a diplomatic reception with the one who just risked her life to save station children. She laughed softly. Perhaps they're both me. People can be complicated, you know? So I'm learning." When they reached her suite, she paused at the threshold, turning to face him. The playfulness that usually dominated her expression was replaced by something more vulnerable. "Thank you, Christopher," she said, using his first name for the first time. "Not just for today, but for seeing me. The real me beneath all the nonsense." Before he could respond, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek, then disappeared into her quarters, the door sliding shut behind her. Christopher stood there for a long moment, his hand unconsciously touching the spot where her lips had been. The assignment that had seemed like a punishment was becoming something far more complicated and dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with mercenaries. "The High Counselor's ship has docked at Bay 12, announced the station's AI. "Director Phelps requests your presence for the reception." Christopher straightened his formal uniform, a rare change from his tactical gear. 3 days had passed since the mercenary attack, and the station had nearly returned to normal operations. The Krell prisoners had revealed little about who had hired them, claiming they'd received their orders through anonymous channels. More puzzling was Illyria's behavior since the incident. She'd been subdued, almost introspective, spending most of her time in her quarters. When they did interact, the flirtatious provocations had been replaced by a quiet cordiality that left Christopher oddly unsettled. He pressed the chime at her suite and waited. When the door opened, he was momentarily taken aback. Illyria wore formal Verdant attire, a flowing gown of iridescent fabric that shifted between emerald and sapphire, accentuating her green skin. Her silver hair was elaborately styled with what appeared to be living flowers woven through the strands. Commander, she greeted him with a formal nod, none of her usual mischief in her expression. You look different, he said. Different good or different bad? Different good, he admitted. Very good. He had high praise from my stoic guardian. She stepped into the corridor, the fabric of her gown flowing like liquid around her. My father appreciates formality, especially in public. It's best if I play the dutiful daughter for now. They walked in silence toward the diplomatic reception area. Christopher could sense her tension growing with each step. Nervous? He asked quietly. My father and I have a complicated relationship. She kept her eyes forward. He'll want a full accounting of the attack, and he won't be pleased that I put myself at risk. You saved lives. That's not how he'll see it. Her voice had a bitter edge. To him, my only value is political, a bargaining chip in his grand alliances. Damaged goods aren't worth as much. Christopher frowned. You're not goods, damaged or otherwise. That's a very human perspective, Commander. Verdant politics operates differently. High Counselor Thalvarin stood near the entrance, deep in conversation with Director Phelps. He had the same emerald skin as his daughter, but where Illyria's features were delicate and expressive, his were sharp and cold. Illyria, he said, his voice deep and melodious despite its coolness. You appear unharmed. Father, she bowed formally. I am well, thank you. So I see. His gaze returned to Christopher. And this is the human responsible for your safety? Director Phelps made the introduction. High Counselor, may I present Commander Christopher Reed, Head of Station Security, and Lady Illyria's personal guard. Christopher offered the traditional Verdant greeting, touching his forehead and heart in sequence. It's an honor, High Counselor. Thalvarin acknowledged the gesture with a slight nod. Commander Reed, I understand you allowed my daughter to participate in a dangerous security operation. The accusation was clear, and Christopher felt Illyria tense beside him. With respect, High Counselor, your daughter's actions were instrumental in saving 32 civilian lives, including 12 children, Christopher replied evenly. Her knowledge of Krell physiology and her unique abilities turned a potentially disastrous situation into a successful rescue. Is that so? How interesting. Perhaps my daughter has finally found a use for her impulsive nature. Illyria's face remained carefully composed, but Christopher could see the hurt in her eyes. If you'll excuse us, the High Counselor continued, I would like a private word with my daughter. It wasn't a request. Illyria followed her father to a secluded corner of the reception hall, her posture rigid. That went well, Phelps muttered sarcastically when they were out of earshot. The High Counselor isn't known for his warmth, but he seems particularly displeased about this incident. He's upset that his daughter showed courage and initiative? Christopher couldn't keep the edge from his voice. He's upset that she risked herself. The Verdant Conclave practices arranged marriages for political alliances. Lady Illyria is his only child. Her marriage prospects are a significant political asset. Christopher watched as Thalvarin spoke to Illyria, his expression stern while she listened with downcast eyes. That explains a lot about her behavior. How so? Acting out, testing boundaries. They're classic responses to feeling controlled. Christopher had seen it before in his work with troubled recruits. She's been rebelling against being treated as property. Across the room, Illyria's posture had grown increasingly rigid as her father continued speaking. Finally, she gave a curt nod and returned to where Christopher and Phelps stood, her face a careful mask. Commander, my father wishes to inspect the security measures on the station, she said formally. Director Phelps has agreed to provide a tour. I am to accompany them. Of course, Christopher replied, studying her face for clues to her emotional state. I'll join you. That won't be necessary, came Thalvarin's voice as he approached. My personal security detail will suffice for this tour. You are relieved of your duties regarding my daughter for the remainder of the day, Commander. It was a clear dismissal. Christopher looked to Illyria, but she kept her gaze averted. As you wish, High Counselor, he said finally, stepping back. He watched as they departed, Illyria walking 2 steps behind her father, every bit the obedient daughter. The transformation from the spirited, defiant woman he'd come to know was jarring. Hours later, Christopher was reviewing security footage from the mercenary attack when his door chime sounded. He opened it to find Illyria standing there, still in her formal attire, but with her elaborate hairstyle now slightly disheveled. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice strained. He stepped aside, allowing her to enter his quarters, a Spartan space that reflected his military background. "I thought you were with your father," Christopher said, closing the door behind her. "I was. For 6 excruciating hours of criticism and political maneuvering." She paced the small room, agitation evident in every movement. "He's arranged a marriage for me." Christopher felt an unexpected twist in his gut. What? To Admiral Pax of the Centaurian Fleet, a political alliance to strengthen trade routes through the Verdant sector. Her voice was flat, but her hands trembled slightly. "The ceremony is to take place in 3 weeks." "And you've just been informed of this?" Christopher couldn't keep the outrage from his voice. "Oh, I've known it was coming. Just not who or when." She laughed bitterly. "My behavior has apparently delayed the inevitable. No one wants a disobedient wife. But after the mercenary incident, my father decided my heroism made me marketable again." Christopher struggled to find appropriate words. "Can you refuse?" "Technically, yes. Practically," she shrugged helplessly. "I would be disowned, stripped of my status, possibly even exiled from Verdant space. I've been raised for one purpose, Christopher, to be a political asset." She sank onto the edge of his bed, suddenly looking exhausted. "Do you know why I've been so difficult with my previous guards? Why I pushed every boundary? I have theories. It was the only control I had, the only choices that were truly mine." She looked up at him, silver eyes glistening. "And then you came along and took even that away." "Illyria, no, don't apologize. You were right to establish boundaries, to treat me like an adult capable of better." A tear slipped down her cheek, leaving a shimmering trail on her green skin. "I just didn't expect it to make things worse." "How has it made things worse?" Christopher sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Because now I know what it feels like to be respected, to make my own decisions that actually matter." She wiped away the tear angrily. "And I know what it feels like to be with someone who sees me as a person, not a possession." The implication hung in the air between them. Christopher felt his professional resolve wavering. "Your father leaves tomorrow?" he asked finally. She nodded. "He's completed his inspection, which was really just an opportunity to parade me before Admiral Pax's representatives. I'm to remain here until the wedding preparations are complete. Then we have time to figure this out." "Figure what out? My future's decided." "Not if we can prove the mercenary attack was targeted specifically at you." Christopher moved to his console. "I've been reviewing the security footage. There are inconsistencies in the Krell's tactics. They seemed more focused on finding you than on controlling the station." Illyria joined him at the console, her earlier despair giving way to curiosity. "You think someone specifically wanted me captured?" "It's a theory. If we can prove it and identify who was behind it, it might give your father reason to reconsider this marriage alliance, especially if it's politically motivated. Admiral Pax does have rivals who would benefit from preventing an alliance with the Verdant Conclave," she mused, her quick mind already working through the possibilities. They worked through the night, Illyria's political knowledge complementing Christopher's security expertise. As dawn approached by station time, they had compiled a substantial file of evidence suggesting the attack had indeed been a targeted attempt to capture Illyria, likely orchestrated by a rival faction within the Centaurian fleet. "It's circumstantial," Christopher admitted, rubbing his tired eyes, "but it's enough to warrant a formal investigation." "My father won't delay the marriage based on suspicions," she said, her earlier energy fading. "He'll see it as all the more reason to secure the alliance quickly. Then we need more than the suspicions. We need proof." Christopher saved their findings to a secure file, and I think I know how to get it. How? The Krell commander is still in the station brig. With the right leverage, he might be persuaded to reveal who hired his team. What kind of leverage? The kind that requires bending a few regulations. Christopher met her gaze steadily. I'm willing to do that, but I need to know, is this what you want? To potentially disrupt a major political alliance? Illyria was silent for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. What I want is the freedom to make my own choices, even if those choices have consequences. She stood, moving to stand before him. What about you, Commander? Are you willing to risk your career for this? The question carried layers of meaning that neither of them was ready to articulate fully. Christopher knew that his motivations weren't entirely professional anymore, but he also recognized the genuine injustice of Illyria's situation. Some things are worth the risk, he said simply. Something shifted in her expression. Hope, perhaps, or resolve. She reached out, her green fingers lightly touching his hand. Then let's get that proof. The Krell commander sat motionless in his cell, reptilian pupils contracting as Christopher and Illyria approached. Commander Reed, he acknowledged, and the prize that slipped out through my claws. Christopher activated the privacy shield. Who hired you to capture Lady Thalvarin? Why would I tell you that? Because I can make your situation better or worse. Christopher leaned closer. Cooperate, and I'll recommend leniency. Refuse, and I'll ensure you're extradited to Verdant space. The Krell's scales rippled anxiously. My employer would do worse if I betrayed them. Your employer isn't here, Illyria stepped forward. What loyalty do you owe them now? The Krell studied her. You speak wisdom. I was contracted through a broker on Centauri Prime. The payment came from House Vex. We need names, Archomanchornis, Christopher pressed. Names I do not have. But there was a communication frequency used for our mission updates. Military grade, Centaurian military. One more thing, the Krell added, his voice dropping. The orders changed during the mission. Originally, we were to capture the green female alive. But just before we breached the station, new orders came through. What new orders? Christopher demanded. Dead or alive? Preferably dead. The Krell's eyes fixed on Illyria. Someone wanted to ensure you wouldn't reach your wedding day. Illyria paled. They wanted me dead? A dead bride makes no alliance, the Krell said simply. As they left the brig, Illyria's expression remained troubled. My father will simply increase security until the wedding. He might even move it forward. Not if the threat comes from within the Centaurian leadership, Christopher argued. You don't know my father. The alliance is too valuable. He'll find a way to make it work, even if it means putting me at risk. Before Christopher could respond, his comm unit chimed. Reed here! Commander, came Director Phelps' voice. High Counselor Thalvarin is demanding his daughter's presence. He's not pleased. We're on our way. High Counselor Thalvarin was waiting in Director Phelps' office, his tall frame radiating cold fury. Illyria, he said as they entered, explain yourself. She lifted her chin defiantly. I'm investigating the attack against me, Father. By interrogating prisoners without authorization, by compiling classified intelligence, he gestured to a data pad, their evidence file. You've accessed restricted information and directly contravened my instructions. We have evidence that the attack was orchestrated by rivals within the Centaurian leadership, Christopher interjected, specifically to prevent Lady Illyria's marriage to Admiral Pax. I'm well aware of the political motivations, Thalvarin replied coldly. Why do you think I've accelerated the wedding arrangements? Even at the risk of your daughter's life. Christopher couldn't keep the anger from his voice. My daughter understands her duty to our people. For a moment, Illyria's resolve seemed to waver, and then she straightened. I invoke the challenge of merit, she said clearly. The High Counselor's composure cracked, genuine surprise crossing his features. What? I invoke the challenge of merit. I reject the arranged marriage to Admiral Pax on the grounds that a more worthy match exists. And who is this supposedly more worthy match? Illyria hesitated, her eyes darting to Christopher. I am, Christopher said, stepping forward. I challenge Admiral Pax for the right to marry Lady Illyria Thalvarin. A deathly silence fell over the room. Thalvaren's expression was one of pure fury. You, a human security officer, you have no standing to issue such a challenge. Actually, Father, Illyria interjected, he does. Commander Reed is the highest-ranking Earth Alliance officer in this sector. He commands the security forces of a major interstellar hub, and he saved my life when your precious Centaurian allies tried to have me killed. The Council would never accept. The Council must accept any legitimate challenge, Illyria pressed. That is our law. Thalvaren's face contorted with barely suppressed rage. Very well, he said finally. The challenge is acknowledged. But know this, Commander. When you fail, as you inevitably will, my daughter will fulfill her duty without further disruption. 3 days later, Christopher stood before the Verdant High Council, opposite Admiral Pax, a distinguished Centaurian whose uniform bore countless medals. The challenge of merit consisted of 3 trials: mind, body, and spirit. The first 2 trials ended with 1 tie and 1 victory for the Admiral. The trial of spirit, Elder Murmuron announced, will take the form of the revelation of truth. She gestured to a luminous creature floating in a crystalline container, a truth sense capable of detecting emotional authenticity. Admiral Pax spoke first, outlining the political benefits of his union with Illyria. The truth sense glowed a steady blue, indicating sincerity. When Christopher's turn came, he abandoned his prepared remarks. I didn't come here seeking a political alliance, he began. I seek this union because I've found someone who challenges me, inspires me, and makes me want to be better than I am. The truth sense began to glow more intensely. To Illyria, I offer what no political arrangement can: the freedom to be herself, to make her own choices, to be valued for who she is rather than what alliance she can secure. I offer partnership instead of ownership, respect instead of obedience, and love without conditions. The truth sense now pulsed with brilliant light. Elder Myron stepped back, startled. The trial of spirit is decisively awarded to Commander Reed. With the trials tied, the decision would fall to the Council, and everyone knew which way they would rule. The Council will now deliberate, Thalvaren began. No, Illyria stood. There is one voice that has not been heard. Mine. Daughter, this is not the traditional procedure, Thalvaren frowned. Yet our traditions are clear that in a challenge of merit, the one being contested for has the right to speak. She moved to the center of the floor. I claim that right now. Elder Mira nodded. The lady speaks truly. By ancient custom, she may address the council. Illyria stood tall. Members of the High Council, I stand before you as both a daughter of the Conclave and as an individual with my own mind and heart. For too long, I have been viewed solely as a political asset rather than a person. She gestured to the Admiral. Admiral Pax is honorable. The alliance he offers would bring benefits. But such an alliance built on a loveless political arrangement would be fragile. Impressive to look at, but easily shattered. Turning to Christopher, her expression softened. Commander Reed offers something different. An alliance not between political entities, but between hearts and minds. The truth sense glowed even more brightly as she spoke. I choose Commander Reed, she declared. Not because it is easy, but because it is right. True alliances cannot be forged through coercion. They must be built on genuine connection and respect for individual dignity. She faced her father directly. Father, you taught me that our greatest duty is to serve the Conclave's best interests. I believe that embracing a new kind of relationship with humanity serves those interests better than another traditional alliance. For a long moment, Thalvaren's expression remained impassive. Then something shifted in his silver eyes. The truth sense does not lie, Hun, he said finally. And neither, it seems, does my daughter. He addressed the assembly. For generations, the Conclave has pursued alliances through traditional means. Perhaps it is time to consider new approaches. Turning to Admiral Pax, he inclined his head respectfully. Admiral, your offer honors us, but it appears my daughter has made her choice. The Admiral bowed with military precision. The lady has chosen. I withdraw my suit with honor. Thalvaren then turned to Christopher. Commander Reed, you have proven yourself worthy in ways I did not anticipate. The Council acknowledges your victory in the challenge of merit. 3 months later, Christopher and Illyria stood on the observation deck of Nexus Station, watching the swirling nebula. Illyria now wore an Earth Alliance uniform as the station's newly appointed Verdant liaison officer. "Credit for your thoughts, Commander?" she asked, bumping her shoulder playfully against his. "Just thinking about how much has changed," he replied, his hand covering hers. 3 months ago, I was dreading babysitting duty for a spoiled alien princess. She laughed. And I was planning new ways to torment another boring human guard. My father's latest communication mentioned the Council is considering a more formal alliance with Earth, a genuine partnership rather than the usual political maneuvering. All because you refused to be a pawn in their game. All because you taught me that boundaries don't mean surrendering my freedom. She reached up to touch his face. That sometimes the greatest freedom comes from choosing to commit to someone worthy. Christopher pulled her closer. "Speaking of commitment, Director Phelps approved our joint quarters request." "Excellent. Your quarters are depressingly Spartan and mine are too aggressively opulent." "We'll find a middle ground," he promised, leaning down to press his forehead against hers in the traditional Verdant gesture. "We always do," she murmured, then tilted her face up to kiss him. As they stood together, framed by the stars, Christopher reflected on their journey. What had begun as a clash of wills had transformed into something neither could have anticipated, a partnership built on mutual respect and love that transcended the boundaries of their different worlds. "Ready for our next adventure, Lady Thalvaren?" he asked. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Lead the way, Commander Reed. But don't expect me to follow all your orders." "I wouldn't dream of it," he replied with a smile. "Some things, thankfully, would never change."